I thought I would make note of that.
Okay. All right. So here's what I wanted to do with you today. So yesterday we talked about leaving assets for your daughters, and we said that even though there's this imperative to not take away Yerusha from your children even during their lifetime, and the only children of yours that are entitled to inherit are the sons and not the daughters, there is still a provision that the rabbi said that you can still leave money for your daughters by giving them gifts in their lifetime. And the reason that the rationale that's offered is that there's a takanas chachamim that you want to make your daughter more marriageable. Remember, that was the whole argument, is that even though you're really not supposed to take away any assets from your rightful heirs, but if you can argue that you need to help to get your daughter married, so we saw in the poskim that that's a justification for giving her a sizable dowry, even if that will end up diminishing your estate significantly, as long as you're leaving something for your heirs. Okay, I want to talk in the same vein about leaving money for your wife as well. Um, and he writes, so before we get into the Imrei Yaakov, there's a tshuva that is quoted widely by the Minchas Yitzchak, who was Dayan Weiss, who passed away in 1989. He was a Dayan in, I believe, both England and in Eretz Yisrael. And he writes as follows: Uvenogeya li ishto. I hope everyone can see this. Uvenogeya li ishto. It's just a very short point he makes in a much larger tshuva. Harei ra'inu shegam chachamenu zal shaktu harbe al takanasa kimavur be'evan ha'ezer. He says, we know that the rabbis were very mindful of taking care of one's wife and not leaving her destitute after divorce or widowhood. The inkain hasvara nosenes, and therefore logic dictates. She'im habal roeh she'im lo yichazek et zuchuyoteha be'iza ofen chuki az tishaer almana nodedet. If the husband realizes, based on the finances of what's going to happen after he dies, that if he does not bolster her financial rights in his estate using some legal method, that she will remain a destitute widow, beli mishanu mashena, without anyone upon whom she can financially rely upon, without any financial reliance. Bevadai einkan mishum ha'avaras nachala in mishayir manayafel yarsha. Then certainly we can rest assured that there is no prohibition of taking away Yerusha from his heirs, provided that at least he leaves something that is of sizable amount, or that is an appropriate amount for his heirs. And so Dayan Weiss basically says that based on the financial realities of what a widow has to face after her demise, if I leave a gift and I structure it legally such that my wife sort of is given a gift before my death, and as a result, I deplete the estate, he says that's legitimate. Now, I just want to point out that there's a later sefer Mishpatecha li Yaakov, which was written by a Dayan in Tel Aviv, and he sort of presents to us in summation. Basically, like we saw before, there were two conflicting rabbinic edicts. One rabbinic edict says, don't deplete your estate for your heirs. But there's another conflicting rabbinic edict, which is make it easier for your daughter to marry. And so therefore, in that situation where there's two conflicting edicts, a person has a right to make his own judgment as to how he's going to apportion his assets to accommodate both of those rabbinic edicts. If he can fulfill both of them, great. And to what percentage he has to lean towards making his daughter's dowry large versus not depleting his estate. He's the final judge on how he wants to manage that financially. And the Sefer Mishpatecha Yaakov states as follows. He writes, and this is an important paragraph, so I wanted us to see it together. Harei shekol ma sheruach chachamim lo nocha himenu hu rak ba'ofen she'osa neged da'at chachamim. He says, that which we saw in Shulchan Aruch, and in the Rav Shulchan Aruch quoted this as well. It's based on the Mishnah in Bava Basra, that if a person takes away a Yerusha from his children, the rabbis are disappointed in him. The rabbis are upset with him. He says that's only true if he's not in accord with the wishes of the sages. Aval kisheruach chachamim lid'og la'almana o lid'og lebanot sheyikfetzu aleihem anashim bazeh ein hadin shel ein ruach chachamim nocheh himenu v'yachol laha'avir. But if there's a counter compelling rabbinic interest, in other words, there's an interest, yes, the rabbi said, we're not happy with you if you deplete your estate so that your heirs are left with much less than they would normally be left with. But the same rabbis who said that we would be upset with you if you did that also said that we would be upset with you also, we would be disappointed if you make it difficult for your daughter to get married, or if you leave a widow, because the Torah is so concerned about taking care of the orphan and the widow. If you leave a widow without funds, we're upset with you also. So that's the argument to say that, yes, it's true. The Mishnah in Bava Batra says, don't deplete your estate because your heirs are entitled to that money. But there's this, the same rabbis also said, make sure you follow the Torah's edict of taking care of the orphan and the widow. So Dimidivrei Shemuel nireh shema'avir nachala me'eza siba shel brabisha o shel ezinyan she'eno yimo kishura. He says, because the only thing that the rabbi said is, don't reapportion your estate based on personal issues that you have with your kids. That was the argument that they were making. In other words, you see one of your children is not behaving correctly, or he's not giving you proper cover, or he's not frum, right? So in those situations, that's where Shmuel says, those are not legitimate criteria or bases for you to deplete your estate or take away Yerusha from that child. Aval kishedoeg lema shechachamim da'agu kemo takanat almana. But if your concern is to worry about the very same things that the rabbis were concerned about, such as taking care of a destitute widow, which so happens to be my wife when I die, so ein bazeh hadin shel a'avurei achsanta. Then the whole Mishnah's concern about you disappointing them no longer applies. Ubevadai delashita tarambam udiime dekol iser hava machmat shemorer kina upirid bein ha'achim. He says, and certainly, I'll go even further, he says. We saw one opinion, it was brought down in the Aruch HaShulchan, and he says this is the Rambam's opinion as well, that one of the reasons that you're not supposed to reapportion your estate is so as not to create jealousy between the brothers, like Yaakov did with Yosef and the brothers. Harei b'chahai gavna shenoten la'almana v'lishar noten b'shaveh, o shenoten labanot kibanim v'kulam cholkim b'shaveh, ein kina upirut. He says that in that scenario where you're giving to your wife and you're giving to your sons, or you're giving to your daughters an equal portion of the estate as much as you're giving to your sons, that's not going to create jealousy. That's not going to create animus and resentment. Ela af latam shehu ka'oker nachala mehatorah. But I'll go even further, he says. Even if you hold that the reason why the rabbis were the rabbis are disappointed with you is because you're uprooting the whole principle of the Torah's prioritization of who inherits you by depleting your estate in your lifetime. Nonetheless, he says, Kevin shiruach chachamim lidog la'almana v'lidog shehabanot yuchlu lihitchatein v'yeleh mimali hitparnes. But if the rabbis are concerned about an almana, and they're concerned about daughters that they should be able to be financially provided for, Kemoshe matzenu b'tikuneihem shel Yisur nichse mizonot habanot haktanot. And we find a similar situation. The rabbis gave you permission to take a certain percentage. The rabbis say 10%, but as we'll see, according to the Ramah, there's another opinion that you could give even more. You could give them an equal portion that you give to your sons. And he says, we don't say that the rabbis are disappointed with you because you're doing the thing that the rabbis are also happy with. And the similar thing is that if you have a daughter that is already married, but you know that your son-in-law has difficulty taking care of her, so then you also are doing what the Chachamim want you to do, is to make sure that members of your family are going to be well provided for. And another sefer quotes from a tshuva from the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer from, again, the early 19th century. He says, Nishal odot echad shenatan b'chayav matanot harbei umetaltalin leishto va'achshav sheniftar ma'arim chatanav shal yedei zeh yigra kocham b'shtar chelik chatzi zachar sheish lemitoras chov gamor v'lachein ein laha'isha koach lahavki chelak habanot. So a man left his wife a sizable portion of his estate, and now the sons are trying to contest that, because they are saying that that's not according to the Torah's wishes. And the Chassam Sofer says that a person can do, while he's still alive, can do whatever he wants with his assets. He says in the Chassam Sofer says that it happens all the time, that a man can add to his wife's ketubah. Now, why is he mentioning the ketubah? Because when you think about it, a ketubah is a promissory note that a man gives to his wife upon marriage, where he says that upon the termination of the marriage, either through divorce or death, this is a collectible note of debt. It's a promissory note, is really what a ketubah is. And she can use this to collect from the estate. And basically what a man has the right to do is to create a living trust or some other kind of legal mechanism such that he puts his wife as the recipient of a gift from his estate while he's still alive, or at one moment before he dies, such that it's not in conflict with the laws of inheritance. Amnam nir shelo katav kein elo legabi matana shekatav lo bechayav, aval matana shititoli shelo achar moto bevadei shedaito maskemet shetzarech lechol apachos shir kamo shekosafti kamo shekosav b'tshuva acheres leil. He says, but the Chassam Sofer would only allow for such a thing when the gift is given during his lifetime. If the gift was only enactable after his demise, so then there might be some other problems that the heirs would have a legal, legitimate claim in Beis Din. But bottom line is that, there are many ways to structure this so that if you want your wife to receive the lion's share of the estate, then, upon your death, there are ways to do it. But one of the ways to do it is to create a living trust so that she is the custodian over your estate. So that, in other words, you basically say that my wife shall be provided for from the estate as compensation for her custodianship over my estate. And she can do with the estate as she wishes, provided that she doesn't deplete it entirely, so that our children, or my children, depending upon whether you have children from her or children from someone else. Certainly, when it comes to second marriages, let's say a man has a bunch of children from his first marriage, and then his first wife, either they divorce or he remarries, because she passed away, and then he marries a second wife, and they don't have any kids because they're older. They're an older couple. Certainly, in that situation, a man has a right to give his second wife a sizable gift from the estate, but he should not deplete the estate entirely. There should certainly be monies left in the estate that are left for his children. But what another option that he can do is he can appoint his wife as the custodian of the estate to administer it, and she can draw an annual fee in compensation to her for being the administrator or the custodian over the estate. There are many different ways to structure it, but the bottom line is that you see from this whole concept that you can create legitimately a conflicting interest that the Chachamim would agree to. In other words, the Chachamim themselves would say to you, yes, we would be disappointed if you completely depleted your estate during your lifetime so that your heirs have nothing to inherit. But if you have a conflicting interest, which is I need to take care of an almana who happens to be my almana, right? So then they would say, okay, so as long as efshel l'kayim shneim, as long as you can fulfill both of those, then you should try to fulfill both. Let me show you another example of this. Here, let me show you. We'll go back into the text of the Imrei Yaakov itself. Here, the Imrei Yaakov quotes again from that same tshuva of the Minchas Yitzchak, which we had just quoted from before, but instead of talking about a wife, he talks about a daughter. He says, "Dan legabi lahorish labanos, umasik sham ba'os yud v'zelushono tavno ledina de benogea labanos ein shum safik diachol hanchil bofen hamol chelik bin achasav." He says, "There's no question that you can leave a portion of your inheritance to your daughters. Ela shebekarkos usfarim nira meharbe poskim she'en lahanchila v'chulei." He says, however, it seems that when it comes to ancestral property that is identified as the estate of the decedent, meaning real estate and sfarim, your library, that he says that it seems from many poskim that should specifically be left to your sons. So specifically when it comes to real estate and books, especially holy books, you should leave those to your sons. But he still says, but if it's not your ancestral property, what we mean by ancestral property is the house that you lived in. But let's say you have other holdings, you have other homes, you have other real estate holdings that you could give to your daughters if it's not something that you lived in. Velo me'achuzas avosov, but not from an ancestral property that, let's say, you may have inherited from your family. Because you want to keep, if there was something that was known as to be, let's say your last name is Schwartz, and this is known as the Schwartz estate, you want to keep the Schwartz estate with the Schwartz family name. There's such a concept. But with other properties, you can certainly leave to your daughters, and all other aspects of the estate can be left to your daughters, and you can even give them a sizable amount. And then he goes at the bottom of this very long piece, which we're not going to go into, and he says at the bottom as follows: Od roi lahosif b'inyan zeh, diyesh lifa'amim la'adam zakein ben ubat. I'd spoken this outside. He says, there are many times, he says, I'd like to add the following. Many times an older man is left with an adult son and adult daughter. Ve'haben lo hichniso lebeito, umeida chabat tiplabo b'mesirus shanim rabos. He says the son never had his father over into the house, or maybe never really let his father live in his house. But on the other hand, the daughter is extremely moser nefesh to make sure that her father is taken care of. And she really acts in many ways as his caregiver. Velule tipula hayal ne'alatz likanes l'moishav zakenim u'machala al yedei kaspo. And if it were not for his daughter's care for him, he would have had to go into a senior care facility and would have had to pay a lot of money in order to be under that kind of senior care facility. O hayachai b'matzav kasha. Or he would have lived alone and he would have been uncomfortable. Life would have been not as pleasant without his daughter. And it happens many times that we know that daughters are worth their weight in gold the older people get, is because daughters tend to, I'm speaking as a father of 9 sons and 1 daughter, Daughters are more precious as we get older because typically daughters are always there to help out their parents, whereas the sons, they get married, they get involved with their own families, and they're not as in touch typically as daughters are. Obviously, there are exceptions, but it does happen many times that the daughter is more devoted and doting on her parents than a son. V'ha'av rotza litin chelek min hachasav b'Yerusha lebito avur hakaras hatov sheyesh lo eleha. And the father wants to leave his daughter a portion of the estate because of his hakarat hatov, because just simply to express his appreciation to her. V'lo mishum onesh lahanish beno avur hitnahaguto hagrua. It's not because he's not interested in punishing his son for his bad behavior. It's not like his attitude is, oh, you never took care of me, so I want to punish you. No, it's legitimately, I have to express proper hakaras hatov to my daughter who spent years of her life taking care of me. There the argument is there's no prohibition whatsoever. Because you're doing something that is deemed to be good and virtuous according to the Torah values. Torah value says that if someone does something kind to you, you should repay their kindness. You should have hakarat hatov. You should repay their kindness. So I have one particular child who is doting on me more than all the other children. So there's an aspect of hakarat hatov. That child spends more time. They expend more resources. They're always in touch. They give me creative gifts. They always check in to make sure that after I went to a doctor's appointment, that I'm okay, etc., etc., etc. So there's nothing wrong with, it's not that I'm interested in penalizing my other children, but I do feel a sense of hakaras hatov, and that he says is perfectly legit. He says, just like we mentioned yesterday, that the rabbi said that if you want to create an aliyah for your neshama, you should leave a certain portion, like a tithing of your estate should be given to tzedakah. And that's a proper thing to do, even though it's taking something away from your heirs. But here too also, if your segregation of funds from your estate is for the sake of doing something that is a Torah value, is a Torah ethic, is something the Torah says it's a good thing to do, like we saw in that Sefer Mishpat Yaakov, right? That, in other words, I got to take care of my almana. I got to take care of someone who did me a kind act, a kind deed, and therefore I want to give my daughter a sizable portion of the estate. Hu hadin bazem mutar. So therefore it's okay over here as well. Ubifrat dinit ba'er diyesh matirim kishma mashirim dalet zuzi in kain kolshkein bazeh deroy litzdarif l'masha kasafti la'el. He says, especially this is true in light of the fact that, remember, we said that according to one opinion, as long as you leave each child the value of 4 zuz from your estate, you're still yotze. So therefore you see there's a certain elasticity in this halacha. As long as you're not being punitive to your children, that's what this halacha really is boiling down to. If you're reapportioning your estate in order to be punitive to one of your children who didn't do what you would have expected of that child, that's what we tell you not to do. And the reason, like the Rav Shulchan Aruch said, is because you never know what the grandchildren are going to turn out to be, or you don't want to create jealousy. But if it's well known in the family, right? And I see this all of the time. And I gave you the example, and it's happened many times where people have said to me, I take care of my parent, and my sister lives in Arizona, and she has nothing to do with my parents. And that's why my parent gave me power of attorney, made me executor of the estate, and now it's creating jealousy. Well, there's no reason for it to create jealousy in that situation. And I speak to the parents also when they are the testator, and they want to know what should they do. So when there's an aspect of hakarat hatov, because one of the children is local, and they are taking care of the parents, there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving them more, but it should be made very clear in the estate documents why you're doing it. It's not a punishment. Each one of our children is entitled to live their lives as they wish. And while it's true, we've done so much for them, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment if we have expectations of our children to do stuff for us, right? We should not be expecting our kids, right? In other words, we try to communicate to our children, you don't owe us anything. We were happy to give this to you. We want you to have a good life. Now go out there and live your lives. We'll be fine, right? That's what every parent wants to communicate to their children, right? If one of our children goes above and beyond all of the other children and make sure that they're going to stay local and make sure that they want to make sure that they have a relationship with their parents and tries to do all of these things to make sure that their parents are taken care of, I don't see, as you see very clearly from the language of the poskim, you're not penalizing your other children. You're rewarding one of the children who went above and beyond your expectations of them. Okay? Questions or comments at this point?
Rabbi, one thing that I'm not entirely clear of um, is if, as often unfortunately happens, the husband predeceases the wife. Are we saying it's not appropriate to leave everything to the wife, and then the children get it once the wife passes on? Like it sounds like you're not that. Would that be considered pushing away the children's entitlement?
What seems from the poskim is that to leave the entire estate to the wife is not the correct thing to do. What you can do is you can structure your your estate documents to make your wife the active administrator of the estate and basically say that she controls the entire estate. It is also correct that sometimes a husband and a wife are legally partners in certain holdings of a man's estate. And in that situation, if the man predeceases his wife, she by default becomes the surviving partner on the estate.
Like when the home is in joint name, for example.
The home is in joint names. So once the husband dies, she becomes the sole owner. Exactly. However, it should not be at the expense of the children. Meaning that if a husband and a wife are partners on the bulk of their assets, they should jointly prepare trust documents that clearly name their children as their heirs. Now, this is very straightforward when you're dealing with one marriage and both parents are the parents of the kids. It becomes much more complicated when there's a second wife or a second husband. And that's why these halachas are very important to know. For a man to leave his second wife all of his assets because he built up a sizable estate together with his second wife, but he doesn't have kids with his second wife, he's got kids from his first wife, that would be incorrect to do. That would be wrong. That would be keneged halacha to leave his children out of the equation, especially when there's a very good chance that the second wife is not going to apportion to the children the inheritance. She may have other interests. She may say, even if she never had her children of her own, it's one thing, especially if she had children of her own from her previous marriage, then it's certainly inappropriate. But even if she didn't have children of her own from a previous marriage and she has no one else to leave it to, it would be a dereliction of one's responsibility halachically to assume that his wife will deal with the estate in that fashion. He should make sure that it's carefully documented in his will that his wife is the administrator and she lives off the estate as long as she wants to, but that whatever's left upon her demise will go to the rightful heirs, which are the children.
Very clearly put. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Okay, sure.
Rabbi, how does the halacha deal with the fact that the children might be minors, and thereby the estate, if you leave it to the wife, you're really indirectly leaving it to the children because she's responsible for them?
That's even better. If she's the mother of the children, that's even better. If the question is going to be, let's say a man drafts a will, and he says that his wife is the sole controller of the estate without naming, and he doesn't name the children at all. How much confidence does he have that his wife is going to take care of the kids? Let's say in 5 years after his death, she decides to remarry, and she makes a new life with a new husband, and either she has new children with her second husband, or she has to help out her husband's kids from his previous marriage, those things have to be discussed with the wife, and he has to take into consideration. All of these things require a husband to carefully detail what his wishes are before he passes away, such that if he does leave everything to his wife without making any kind of preconditions whatsoever, then he is potentially endangering the estate from his children, because once they become of age, if she has a legal right to basically say, you kids are on your own, she might do that. You want to make sure that that's not going to happen. Okay, the last thing that I'd like to do is to discuss with you, and we'll do that tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, how mechanically this is done. How does one create in his will documents the legal elements in order to legitimately create a reapportioning of his estate that is not according to the Torah's priorities? For example, a man wishes to leave a portion of his estate to his daughter. How do you do that? So you have to create a structure where that's one moment before you die, you create a gift for your daughter. Because as we say, a daughter does not legitimately inherit. She has no rights of inheritance automatically. So you've got to create a mechanism in your trust documents that a moment before your death, you wish to give a gift to your daughter of a percentage of the estate. And we'll show you that there's already documentation. I sent it to you earlier in the week on the WhatsApp group, so that you could have a chance to peruse it. We're going to go over that in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. And tomorrow will be our last day when we focus on issues of wills and estates, even though, of course, we could spend weeks on this subject alone, but we're going to go beyond that after tomorrow. Okay? So I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll see you, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow.
Shkoyach, Rabbi. Thank you. Take care, gentlemen.